Hey, gang. This is Heather, Hope, and Heidi. If you're a first time listener, we're excited you found your way to the podcast. And of course, if you've listened to the first and only one and you're back for more, we're just as excited. And here's a little BTW moment. For those of you joining this community, the one that we're trying to create through the podcast, we thought to ourselves, what is it that we could call our listening community? And so we decided to call you our Finding Our Way Throughers. So just want to give a shout out to those of you who are following us, listening to us, and supporting us as we attempt really to support one another and all of you find your way through whatever it is you find yourself smack dab in the middle of right now.
Whoop, whoop. Shout out to all of our Finding Our Way Throughers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, so true. We feel truly, deeply honored that you would spend your time with us in this way. All right, well, Heath and Hope, before we get to our topic today, we also have to make mention that it is Super Bowl Sunday. And wanted to do a little bit of a check-in with you, see if you have any predictions about who do you think might win the game tonight.
All right. Well, I think that both teams are pretty evenly matched, but I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes just has more Super Bowl experience. So I think because of that, I'm going to go with the Chiefs.
And don't you like the Chiefs because of its Philadelphia affiliation?
Yeah. So Andy Reid was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles for a long time. And, you know, we've got the Kelsey factor going on. Jason Kelsey's like beloved here in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's another reason. And then of course I would be remiss if I didn't say it. I think we're all, you know, Swifties. We're all pretty big Taylor Swift fans. So, you know, that's factoring into it too.
Awesome. What about you, Heath?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, to what Hope just said, I think the teams are really evenly matched. But I do think the Chiefs will probably pull it off. And again, I love Taylor and Travis too. The 49ers, I would love to see them pull it off too, just because I'm a huge fan of underdogs and the quarterback of the 49ers has a great story. But I think because of Mahomes' experience, the Chiefs will probably do it. What about you, Heidi?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had to be reminded about who's playing in the Super Bowl tonight, to be honest.
Super Bowl what?
Yeah, exactly. But once I realized it was the Chiefs and the 49ers, you know, I've always been a fan of Patrick Mahomes. I've just enjoyed watching him play football over the years. And so, I mean, as you listen to us, you would think, you know, we're wannabe ESPN commentators. But
we're not.
We're not.
Clearly.
But I mean, I thought that would be kind of a fun question to ask you guys.
It was. Thank you for asking.
Trying to be relevant, you know.
No crazy sports betting going on here.
Yeah, you wouldn't make a lot of money off of us.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So I guess we'll have to, you know, make mention of who won for our next podcast for all of you listening people. Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about something
not related to football.
And a lot more serious.
Exactly. Much more serious. See, I think we're laughing so much because it's a topic that makes us all want to cry.
Exactly. We're doing the opposite.
Exactly. Laughing when we want to cry.
Exactly.
But yeah, so today we're talking about something that, of course, the three of us have found ourselves smack dab in the middle of. And yeah, before the drum roll, please.
I wish I had a little drum.
I know, right? We need to get one of those for the podcast.
Yeah, we need a sound making machine.
If you want to try to guess the topic before we tell you, here's a hint, okay? We're 54 years old and we're women. Another little hint is most every woman will experience what we're going to be talking about today at some point in time in their life, but it's a topic that isn't really openly talked about. So, for those of you who listen or are listening, what is it that you think we're referring to? If you guessed menopause, you guessed right.
I feel like we should be doing our give me an M, give me an E, give me an N cheer. Oh, pause.
Just like the old sports chants too, like be aggressive, MENOP,
Yeah.
AUSE, menopause are we.
Well, having found ourselves smack dab in the middle of menopause, I think all realize we need a lot of cheerleading to help us get through. So that's funny, guys. I can picture cheerleaders holding up like little signs next to each other with a MENOPAUSE. Well, most middle-aged women, that we know, ourselves included, have dealt with, are dealing with, or of course will deal with the symptoms of menopause privately. And what's hard to make sense of is why, right? Because if pretty much every woman is going to experience it, it kind of begs the question, why isn't menopause a topic that is more normative to discuss culturally, when to repeat, right? It's ubiquitous. It's this inevitable thing that's going to happen for every woman, for the most part. So Hope and Heath, before we talk about our own experiences of menopause and how, we're finding our way through this season, I was wondering if you had any thoughts, any opinions or ideas about why menopause isn't really talked about more openly. I mean, of course, we know there are plenty of women who talk to their girlfriends about symptoms that they experience when they experience them, but it does seem like menopause isn't a culturally normative like table topic. And so, you got any ideas as to why?
Yeah, I mean, Hyde, I'll start. I think there are several. I won't name them all. We can kind of go back and forth on this, but I think the first thing is menopause is really it's personal, right? Even though so what I mean by that is every woman experiences menopause differently.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we share common symptoms of menopause, our journeys through menopause are different and they're pretty personal. So I think a lot of women probably just keep it to themselves and don't necessarily know that some of the symptoms that they're having are actually menopausal symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, my experience has been, I didn't have a lot of education about menopause even as I was going through it. And I also just think it's a pretty significant change, physical changes, emotional changes. And I think every change, regardless of menopause or, other life changes, transitions are difficult. And trying to navigate through transition, I think, is something that, again, is personal. And so I think that a lot of women just keep to themselves and go inward instead of outward, because, they believe that it's this personal journey that they're on. So I'm going to pause there and turn it to you, Heath, and see if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are great comments,
Mm-hmm.
and I agree with all of them. I think it is very personal, and I think because it's personal, that a lot of women might feel shy or embarrassed to talk about some of the symptoms with other folks, because it's sometimes difficult to openly talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, again, this is a period of time, like you said, transitions are tough. I think, a lot of women don't really want to accept this phase in their life because, when you're young, you think you're young and invincible. But when you sort of hit this menopause, this cycle of menopause, you start to better understand mortality. And that can be a little bit scary. And then again, I think it's just this whole societal stigma around aging, right? And menopause has largely been something I think that women are supposed to quite quote, quotes, kind of suffer their way through it, right? I mean, the irony is that so many women, effectively run their households, right? And they get stuff done. And, menopause might be something that they just tackle that way. It's like every other task,
You just have to get
get
through it, right?
don't complain about it and get it done. And then lastly, just to your point about, I think a lot of times women don't even know they're experiencing symptoms, or their symptoms they are experiencing are related to menopause. So it's a lot. And Hyde, I'd love your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you guys have said, I totally agree with. And I do, I mean, some of what I'm going to say, I think is redundant, but I think first, our culture doesn't do endings very well. And menopause is an ending in the sense of a reproductive one.
Right.
When a woman can no longer be a conduit of life. And I think it's a culture we live in that is obsessed with youth, as I think one of you guys just said, and it's one that stigmatizes aging. So I think there's a kind of cultural shame that middle-aged menopausal women also sort of absorb. Menopause, right? It signals an aging body and a changing one.
Yeah.
Along that birth to death life cycle continuum. And so at this stage in our life, I think similar to what you just said, Heather, we're somewhere closer to dying than we were in our younger years. And, again, there's just so much cultural shame aging people are subjected to, because what you hear, what you see on TV, I mean, we can't really get away from these messages that get us to believe that we need to stay as young as we can for as long as we can. But we can't fight the natural order of things. That's not the way it works. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely why, I think a lot of this isn't normalized in our culture.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Because if you think about other cultures, aging is revered in so many other cultures. You guys remember, I lived in Japan for a time after college, and one of the things that I loved and still love so much about the Japanese culture is how much respect elders in Japan are provided. As people age in Japan, they're viewed as having, this experience and this wisdom. And it's, I look at that and I look at, here in the US, it's completely different, right? I almost feel like when you're aging here in the US, you're sort of kicked to the curb, right? It's a time. I mean, Heidi, I think you just said
you're a societal burden.
You're a societal burden, and things change. It's really it's unfortunate. I think I said to both of you a while ago when we were talking about this. There's this idea in Japan. Menopause is referred to as something called konenki, and it really sort of translates to the season of regeneration. And there's this belief that once you're kind of through this, that your body's out of balance, and through this time period, you're kind of coming back into balance. And once you get through it, you're this elder stateswoman. I think it would be so really, truly life changing for women here if this society and this culture viewed women who are going through menopause the same way. Unfortunately, we just don't. And like both of you have said, there's this obsession with youth and beauty here. And menopause is just one sign that, women are not, youthful anymore. But it's really, it can be a pretty powerful transition. And, I wish that here in this culture, we looked at it as something that could be empowering, as opposed to, Heather, I think something you said, which is that society makes you feel like you're going to suffer through it.
Yeah, I have these two quotes that I look at because of the stage of life that I'm in. And I wish that I could cite the source of the quotes, but I've only ever been able to, credit them to anonymous. But
Do you
in
have the
it's,
quotes? Do you know them?
I do, but, it speaks pretty much to what you just said, Hope. It says menopause is not the end. It's a new beginning. Embrace the changes and you'll find the strength from within. And then there's another one that talks about menopause isn't an ending, it's a metamorphosis into a beautiful, powerful butterfly. And if we do transitions well, these ages and these stages that we pass through, right, I think would be more of a time in a woman's life where we come into ourselves. We feel even more comfortable in our own bodies than we ever have really our entire lives.
Yeah, those are beautiful quotes. I love those.
They're beautiful quotes. And I think too that, again, with more education around it, you shift the conversation to what you just said, Hi, about, really transitioning to sort of the positive outcomes from menopause, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where we are in our life stages. And, on some level, it gives women sort of a greater sense of freedom, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's how I think all three of us have been feeling as we've had conversations and talked more about this outside of the podcast.
Yeah, and I think it's a time of life where we're not just sort of experiencing physical changes based on the symptoms that each of us have talked about having, but there's also other things going on in life, right? Like we've spent so much of our lives spending our time focused on other people, those other people being our kids, and we're getting to a place where we're empty nesting. Heidi, you've been through it. Heather and I are, very close to it. And so there's also this, like I've been taking care of others for a really long time. It's now time for me to take care of myself. And it just happens that it's coincided with this stage of life. So, it's a time to be reflective, but a time that can be, again, pretty empowering.
And, like I was telling you guys, I mean, I read a really fascinating statistic. It was from the Society of Women's Health Research about the fact that the average woman spends a third of their lifetime post-menopausal, right? And I mean, again, I don't think we're all going to live to 100 or want to live to 100, but if you do, that would be 33 more years, right? And if you think about how long that is, it's a very long time. And so if you think about everything we've been through and, all of the experience that you've gained over your lifetime so far, right? That experience leads to you feeling a lot more competent as a woman and a human being. And, your ability to speak your mind now, I think, is greater than it ever was when you were younger. So I do think, again, with more education around it and more conversations, women should feel much more empowered by it than as someone being thrown away by society.
Yeah, I just love the idea that women in other cultures are celebrated, and then it's this idea of like a rebirth, or regeneration, or renewal. So,
and I think Heidi used to quote at one point that we have one life, but within one life, or I'm sorry, we have one lifetime, but within that lifetime we have many lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like this is a new path in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think your comments are all great. I think really good opportunity to segue into actually sort of talking a little bit more, like defining menopause and talking about some of the symptoms before we actually talk about our own particular experiences with menopause and how we've been, trying to find our way through. So, Head, do you want to go ahead and spend just a little bit of time defining the sort of phases and talk about some of the symptoms? And Hope, if you have anything to add to what Heather is saying, go for it.
Sure, Hyde. Great. And I guess I would say the disclaimer here is that we are not medical doctors.
Exactly. Exclamation point, exclamation point.
Yeah, we're just discussing the topic as women with our own experiences and experiences, talking to other women as well. And so, you know, the cycle of menopause you have perimenopause, which effectively is the time leading up to menopause. And that typically is, 5 to 7 years on average. You have erratic periods, et cetera. And then menopause is actually the period of time where your period stops. And then post-menopause, you're not considered postmenopausal until you have not had a period with for a full year. And then fun, sort of the common symptoms that you experience, throughout that cycle of menopause are, very erratic periods or irregular periods. Sort of common symptoms related to menopause are, hot flashes. We talk about that a lot. Insomnia, decreased libido. A lot of women have night sweats. Weight gain is another one. Bloating, headaches, fatigue, anxiety, depression. I mean, you name it. The list is very long.
Mhm.
And again, I know some women experience it very differently. Some don't have symptoms related to menopause, but the majority of us do.
It's I'm listening to you list out the symptoms. It's I think fascinating to think about the changes that occur as a result of a degradation of a pretty important hormone in the body. It's pretty fascinating to think about how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Estrogen in particular
Yeah.
is, like they say, the mother of all hormones, right?
Yeah.
Because every organ in the human body has estrogen receptors, and people always think about estrogen as a reproductive hormone, but it plays such a huge role. It's such an important role in so many other parts of our bodies. And so some of the symptoms that we experience in menopause have everything to do with that decrease in the hormone.
And I was just thinking about a statistic I saw, I think from the National Institute of Health, that says that 85% of women that are going through menopause will experience symptoms associated with menopause. So to the 15% of the women out there, let me just say, you're really lucky. For the other 85%,
Oh, God bless you.
For the other 85% of which, we're included. Some of the symptoms aren't super fun. And yes, God bless you.
And I wish that we had known about the 85-15, because I would have been like, where do I sign up for the 15% that don't experience any symptoms? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
or where do I even sign up?
Good for you. Good for you.
And where do I sign up for anybody who's in the 85%? Where do I sign up to really figure out what to expect? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Hope, maybe you want to start then talking about what your experience with menopause has been like?
Sure. It has been not super fun. I would say I would classify it as somewhat, I don't know, uncomfortable. Again, it's changes. It's things that that I'm experiencing physically that don't feel good. Hot flashes for me have been probably the worst thing for me because they're completely uncontrolled. Right. Some of the other things I think you can find a solution for, but hot flashes just kind of come on completely on their own. I was
they're totally unpredictable.
Totally
You're
unpredictable. Right. A funny story. I was at a swim meet last week, and for anyone listening who goes to swim arenas or auditoriums for swim meets, you already know they're hot and they're humid. And I was sitting with a group of friends at this swim meet last week, and all of a sudden I just felt like, how it is. The heat starts to rise. Started to feel my face getting hot. I started to feel like, really, after a while, sweat trickling down my stomach. And
so comfortable.
And then honestly, you guys, I was taking my sleeve and was like patting my head because I was sweating. And then I actually had to excuse myself. I was like, I'm having a hot flash. I'm going to go out out of the pool and try and get cool. But what I really wanted to say was, could someone please get me a glass of water and a fan? Because it's just not fun. So hot flashes have probably been the worst. Definitely night sweats. Those aren't very comfortable. I kick the blankets off of myself a lot during the night. Decreased libido. I mean, that's been hard, I think, to handle. I don't know that, even talking to my doctor, I'm not sure that that's something that was communicated. And so I think, like, importantly there, it's just making sure I've, been able to communicate with my husband about that.
And again, can I interrupt for just a second too?
Yeah.
I think when you talk about decreased libido or lack of sexual drive, desire, it's another topic of conversation culturally that isn't really normalized. And it's such a huge deal.
It's such a huge deal.
For this period of time in a woman's life, because it doesn't just affect the woman, it affects the partner as well. And
it's such an important part of the relationship.
Yes. That connection is super important. Yes.
So sorry, I hope I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no. So, I mean, I think the most significant ones would just be what I just mentioned, sort of the hot flashes, like just a decreased, a lower libido, and night sweats, for sure. And then I've communicated this story to both of you, because I think it's pretty hilarious. I, was experiencing, at least a little, like earlier on, some pain during intimacy. And so I honestly thought something was like really wrong with me. I really did. And I went to the doctor, and, she's wonderful. My doctor's so great. And she did an exam, and she was like, everything is so perfectly fine with you. She was like, what you're experiencing is just a symptom of menopause. And you guys, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I was like so happy. And on the other hand, I had no idea. Like, I just didn't know what that symptom was for me. So it's been a time of, learning more about my body and trying to figure out, how to make the things that I'm experiencing not matter as much.
It's fascinating though too, right? Like, when you think about the focus on, like, girls, right, in their developing bodies, like, there's information that, as moms, we try to provide to our kids about that time in their life when they're going to start menstruating. But it seems like when, you're in that stage where your menstruation is ending, there's just not really a lot of information provided, or if there is, it's because you've asked your doctor about it, or you've tried to kind of be proactive in understanding what it's going to be like, what the experience is going to be like, because, you have this idea that all women go through it. So at some point in time, we know we're going to be there, but, like, to understand when that starts and, what we should be, like, looking for, I think sometimes, people just don't know.
No, it's one of those things. I have been in sales my entire professional life, and the one thing that is super important in this profession is that you're always setting expectations. When expectations are set, people know what to expect. So Heidi, your point is really interesting, because there's not any real body that sets expectations for women about what to expect, right? When you hit menopause, there's information out there, but there's no one, like, specifically saying, hey, when you hit this specific age, someone's going to come and tell you, here are all the things that you could potentially experience. And if you experience those things, they're clear signs of menopause. Like, at least for me, I didn't have the experience of having any expectation set. So sort of going into this blind.
Sorry, Hopi. I was just going to say, if you think about sort of like menopause education, right? When we're young kids in middle school, everybody, has sex education classes where they talk to you about what happens as you get older, and they talk to you about having a period. So even though at that age it's incredibly awkward for a lot of girls, you do have more information about it, and then obviously you go home and you can talk to your mom or your sisters, et cetera, about it. But at this phase in our lives, there's no generalized menopause education, right? Um, so it is pretty interesting. And it goes to the point about why a lot of women don't talk about it, because I think oftentimes they don't even know that they're experiencing symptoms related to menopause or the symptoms that they're experiencing. You know, they just think something else is wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopi, did you have anything else to say about your experience?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's been probably a pretty typical experience, very honestly. I think, you know, a lot of women have similar symptoms. Those are primarily the symptoms that I've had. What about you guys?
Heidi, do you want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I think for me, you know, again, pretty typical stuff. I mean, you know, as it starts with perimenopause, you know, you get the irregular and erratic periods. I think that moved into, you know, hot flashes. I think one thing that I have personally really struggled with is insomnia. Um, you know, I never had a hard time falling asleep, and through menopause, falling asleep for me has been a real challenge. I mean, some nights I lay in bed and I am just wide awake. I literally cannot fall asleep. And I think also too, for me, you know, anxiety has never been something that I've experienced you know, for most of my life. And all of a sudden through menopause, I started having, you know, a lot of like heart palpitations. I would be, you know, sitting at my desk at work or, you know, laying in bed at night, and all of a sudden my heart would just start racing, and there was nothing, you know, sort of imminent that effectively I should be anxious about.
Yeah.
And that still remains a challenge for me as well. And then one thing which I think is it is funny, and I think I told you guys this, but you know, for a long time, I would literally be woken up out of a sound sleep with this weird tingling sensation in my right foot, and only my right foot. It wasn't like I was getting it in my feet.
Okay.
And it was a sensation of like a crawling, if that makes any sense. It wasn't like a pins and needles type situation where your foot falls asleep and you can't move it. It was just a weird tingling kind of itchy feeling, but not itchy. And
Sounds
I still
awful.
get that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I still get that intermittently. But again, that was a situation where I let it go for about 2 weeks. And then I was talking to, you know, my husband about it. And he was like, go to the doctor. And, you know, lo and behold, I went to the doctor, and she was like, well, guess what? A lot of women experiences weird tingling feelings in their extremities during menopause. And I'm like, oh, okay, check the box. This is so fun. So yeah, that's been it. And then actually something else I've noticed too is just sort of a loss of strength. You know, I used to be able, I used to be able to move stuff and lift stuff easier. And even like, you know, taking covers off of jars and stuff, turning them. And again, I understand that that's a pretty common symptom of menopause as well. So mostly typical. But again, there's a lot of different symptoms related to menopause. So I think the more a woman can learn what they are, it might make them feel a lot less anxious about what they're experiencing. So
And less alone, right?
and less alone for sure. But having said that, Hyde, what about you? What has been your experience?
You know, I think that I was experiencing a lot of like perimenopausal symptoms, um, and had no real idea that they were perimenopausal. So what I mean by that is I was kind of struggling with some depressed mood for a while, and noticing things like my hair was growing so fast. And I'm like, wow, my hair's never been growing this fast, like my entire life. And before, you know, before menopause, you know, there's just major changes in the fluctuation of hormone level, right, of estrogen. Like that's one of the things that I probably should have been more alert to. Like, why is my hair growing so fast? And I think a lot of it had to do with like just excess estrogen in my body. And then there were some like brain fog was huge for me and still kind of continues to be an issue for me. I struggle with like just concentrating. I mean, it's never really been something that I've wrestled with, and also some memory issues too.
Mhm.
And all of these are like menopausal. But again, you know, as you're aging, you're like, wow, is this just like the symptom of aging,
Right.
or is it, you know, just changing hormone levels in my body? And this is just like perimenopause, menopause stuff.
Probably a
Because, you know,
combination,
when I
right?
talk about depressed mood, I mean, some of the symptoms of depressed mood are like brain fog, you know, challenges concentrating and memory issues. And so I was like, well, maybe I'm just depressed. Um, so yeah, I wasn't as educated as I would have loved to be, to kind of just have figured out how to navigate through that part of my experience. And then, um, you know, I actually never stopped menstruating. Like up until June of 2021, I was still getting my period every month. So I was about 50, 51 at the time. And I, at that time, was diagnosed with breast cancer. Because really before then, there'd never really been a time when I didn't get my period every month, except when I struggled with anorexia when I was younger. I was never formally diagnosed, but I didn't get my period for quite a while. And the only other time the only other time I stopped getting my period monthly was when I moved to Bolivia, South America, as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Mhm.
My period stopped for like 4 months, I think, which I understand now is totally normal when there's a big adjustment, like moving to another country alone, adapting to a new culture, learning language, interacting with people that are strangers until they're no longer strangers, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, so for me, um, you know, I was actually, because of the breast cancer, I was um, actually put into menopause as a post-operative treatment plan.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to suppress like all estrogen in my body. And since then, I've been, you know, estrogen suppressed for about a little over 2 years now. My main issue with menopause, I mean, I'm in menopause. My hormone levels are being monitored by my oncologist to make sure that my body is actually in menopause, because I stopped taking the drug that I was needing to take every 3 months. That was, you know,
Suppressing.
forcing me into
Yeah.
menopause. So I'm hoping and praying actually that I'm in menopause, because I obviously don't want to start getting my period again. So that's something like to be determined. But primarily, you know, my experience with menopause since being on this particular drug to suppress estrogen has been just some night sweats, to the point where, you know, like I'll wake up just saturated, like not only, you know, am I drenched, but like my sheets are drenched, and like I have to get up, take a shower because I'm just so hot. And then the hot flashes have been pretty prevalent for me. Which it's funny, like what Hope was saying. I mean, sometimes I'll be sitting with my clients and, you know, I just start sweating, and I'm like, oh God, please don't let my clients see like sweat dripping from my head. So, so far, so good. So far, no one said, Heidi, is everything okay? Are you doing fine? Um, but yeah, so since being like in menopause, I think the hot flashes and the night sweats are tough. And again, just like that brain fog, concentration, memory issue, that's been a real issue for me.
Isn't it so interesting? You know, you're sitting and having a hot flash and hoping that your client doesn't see. Think about all the women who are in those situations, whether they're at work or, you know, in the middle of a presentation, and all of a sudden they just start to have a hot flash. And you know,
Yeah,
I know
right.
it's happened to me where, you know, in my head I'm thinking, oh no, I know I'm having a hot flash, but then the other part of me is like, dear God, please don't let anybody see that I'm having a hot flash. Like, I look or feel for like a perspiration on my forehead or something.
Beads dropping down your head.
It's like terrifying, right? But then you think about how many women go through this when other people in the room may just have absolutely no idea. Like, so in a way, you like each person is experiencing that independently, when in reality, don't you just wish you could just stop and pause and say to everybody, sorry, I'm having a hot flash right now. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Give me 5 minutes, please.
Yeah. Give me 5 minutes, please. I'm going to find that fan.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Seriously. And, or, even like with memory challenges for me. I mean, I don't know if you guys have had memory challenges, but I mean, I'll be sitting with people and, this word that should be coming so easily to me is not coming. And I'm sitting there internally, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, all right, like I can't think of that word. So what's another word that might be like close to the word that I'm trying to remember, but I can't currently, like, how do I continue like the flow of this conversation? So there's not just like this huge pause and kind of like a, do you want to finish saying what you were saying? You know what I mean? Just like the internal,
we do
subjective experience versus what you're thinking other people are thinking in that time.
I find myself asking all the time, okay, what's that word? What's that word I'm looking for? It's the same. Yeah. It's the same thing. Completely
it
understand.
Happens every day. And then I start going through the dictionary, A, B, C, D, trying to remember what the word is. But, Heidi, to your point, I mean, that brain fog and that difficulty concentrating is really a very common symptom of menopause. And, a couple of weeks ago, I was actually screened by a doctor for ADD. Because I was like, I have never had a hard time concentrating. I feel like I'm being, I've always been like a good multitasker. And, you feel like you're being pulled in many different directions. And I'm like, why on earth is it like so hard to get stuff done now? And, after doing the screening, the doctor was like, I'm sorry, no, you don't have ADD. It's probably a part of, the aging process. And, so, he was like, have a conversation with your doctor about it the next time you see her, which is good because I'm seeing her tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good. But it does kind of feel a little bit like attention deficit stuff because, I mean, for me, like I'm an avid reader. I love to read. And for the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, it has been so hard for me to retain any of the information that I'm reading in a book. I mean, I have to like read it over and over again. And that's just never been an issue for me. Or to try to recount what I just read to somebody. Like it's super frustrating. And I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? Like, why is this now so normal for me where beforehand it was so abnormal, But then again, after doing the research and trying to understand what's going on in the body, it's like, oh, okay, this is just one more symptom of menopause. Gotcha.
One more of those fun things that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. So is there anything else you guys want to say about your own experience with menopause before we talk about, how we individually have sort of tried to find our way through or navigate this whole experience?
I think the three of us have been pretty thorough in covering some of the things that we've experienced during menopause. So no, I think I don't have anything more to add.
Yeah. And I would just say that, again, it goes back to what both of you guys were talking about in terms of the physical and the emotional challenges of menopause. I mean, the list is very long.
Yes.
And again, the more people know about it, the more they can, feel better and feel like they're not alone in what they're experiencing.
And also just,
it's a major, major change.
Yeah. And also just recognize that those symptoms that they're experiencing, they can seek help for some of those things too, right? Because I feel like there's education out there, but it's up to each individual to seek that education, to seek that information, to go find it, as opposed to someone saying, here's all of the stuff you need, kind of, happy reading. I think each individual person, I know I have looked for information and it's there, it's readily available, but I have to be the one seeking. There's nobody saying, here's the information that you should be reading before you hit this stage of life.
So that's what I hear you saying. I mean, part of the navigation through the experience is to be an advocate for yourself and, realize that no one's coming to, just hand this to you put this, book of information in your lap and say, okay, read up on this so that, you're prepared to move through the cycles. It's like, nope, I gotta go figure out where I can learn about this myself so that I can, figure out how to find my way through.
Yeah.
Heath?
Yeah, I mean, I think to both of your points, right? I mean, self-advocacy is really how I've found my way through, just because, it started with the weird tingling sensation in my foot, which, I thought was, some sort of neurological problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being, a symptom of menopause. So I think, starting conversations with your doctor is really important. I know it can sometimes be hard to do, because I think oftentimes when you go to your doctor, you think they're going to bring up the topic of menopause, and when they don't, you might not, inquire. So I think, sort of keeping a diary of symptoms you're experiencing, and then, bring that list of concerns to your doctor, and just, have an open dialogue with your doctor. I think it goes a long way in terms of, trying to educate yourself, because as Hope said, I mean, there are a lot of resources out there to read. There are a lot of websites to go to get information, but unless you're the one seeking it, you're not going to be led to those resources unless you're actually looking for the information to better understand it.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
Sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, finding our way through this, I think we're all continually finding our way through this. And I think, yeah, self-advocacy is very important. And then obviously a combination of, in my mind, making sure that the food that, I'm eating specifically is healthy. Exercise, making sure, continually moving the body. And so, and I also think, just communicating with those around you, what's going on makes the journey a little easier.
Yeah. And I think for me, just being mindful of things that I need to do for my aging body, my changing body. One of the things that I've done is I've started working with like an acupuncturist and have been taking different kinds of Chinese herbal supplements, which have been helpful. Some like bone support supplements, because as levels of estrogen decrease in your body, women are a lot more susceptible to osteopenia, osteoporosis. I mean, just a lot of changes to the structure of the body, bones and joints and stuff like that. And I make sure that if I have an extra comforter on my bed at night, it's easy for me to just flip off of myself when I'm like, sweating at 4 a.m. I have not gotten a cooling pad. My night sweats haven't been so bad where I felt like I've needed to do that. But I know there are women absolutely that do that, I think.
And I think a lot of women swear by them too.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of like brain fog, concentration, memory stuff, I just still continue to push through, trying to read and keep my brain as active as I possibly can, with the hope that at some point in time, some of the symptoms won't be so, what I feel like can be pretty severe. And then just in terms of like, lower libido and what that means just in terms of my relationship with my husband, it's, having communication conversations about what we can do so that both of us, try to honor the sexual intimacy that we enjoy in the relationship. And that's been a big loss, when you enjoy the sexual intimacy in relationship and you don't have real desire for it anymore. It can feel like a huge loss. It's like you're almost grieving this thing that's been, an enjoyable thing for both me and my spouse. And yeah, like what Hope was referencing, just like vaginal dryness and stuff. I mean, there are a lot of different products on the market that women can certainly purchase. There's something called Replens, which my oncologist recommended to me. Women can use coconut oil, like any kind of natural oil, to help lubricate the vagina before sex. And there's something you can talk to your gynecologist about. It's called Mona Lisa Touch. It's a procedure to help moisturize, like I think it's the cervical tissue, or no, it's vaginal tissue, I guess. But that's something that you have to do. Like, you have to go to the gynecologist periodically, and insurance doesn't cover it, but it has proven to be like really effective. So, I mean, those are just some of the things that I have, tried to figure out along the way, as I've been just trying to navigate this new stage in my life as well.
Great
So,
points.
And Heidi, I just wanted to say something too, which I think was really interesting when you were talking about having the conversation with a significant other. Because again, back to some of the statistics we've read in the Society of Women's Health Research. Interestingly, it said, only 1 in 25 women actually discuss menopause symptoms, with actually a mental health provider. And then only 17% of women speak to their significant others about the menopause symptoms that they're experiencing. So again, to your point, I know it can be a difficult conversation, but it is actually a very important conversation, because it's not just happening to you as the woman, it's happening to your significant other as well. And to the point about post-menopause, women are very susceptible to things like osteoporosis and heart disease. So, I think talking to your doctor about specific supplements as well is important, because, women need calcium for their bone health. But like something I take every day is glucosamine and chondroitin, and that's specifically for joint support. And again, it's important to talk about a healthcare provider about that stuff, because some of the supplements you can take, if women are taking other medications, there can be an offset to that. So it's important to have that conversation as well.
And Heather, I think one of the things that you just said that I find interesting is that, a very small percentage of women actually talk to their partner about some of the things that they're experiencing in menopause. When you think about it, boys, men, they're not really part of the discussion when we first start menstruating, right? They're not part of that discussion really through most of life, and so it's probably pretty hard for them to be an active participant when we're going through these stages. And I think the reason I wanted to say communication is so important, like, to anybody who feels uncomfortable trying to talk to a spouse, a partner, a significant other, it's really important to have an open communication. So try to find the strength to do that, because your journey doesn't have to be solo. If you can find the strength internally to have those conversations, it can be a better journey for you.
yeah. And I would just say that, I mean, we could have 2 more podcasts about some of the stuff that you guys just brought up, really. But, men really aren't socialized to talk about their feelings. And so when you have a spouse, female, that is trying to talk about some of the stuff that they're experiencing, and they want the emotional support, and they want to have the kind of communication that they hope to have, sometimes it can be really hard for men to really know what to say, or, how to feel, because often they're not very connected to their feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's changing over time. I mean, emotional health is being talked about a lot more, and it's being normalized in the culture. And so I think that's important to say. And the other thing is, while I think the 3 of us enjoy, good, healthy relationships with our partners, there are plenty of people that are going to be listening to this podcast that really don't.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the topics that really bring people into, like, couples therapy or marriage counseling are money, sex, communication, and in-laws, actually, problems with in-laws. And so, communication is so important, but it's something that people don't really do a good job with.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the middle of people trying to find their way through this topic today, menopause, if that barrier exists for people, for a woman to have a conversation with her partner, I mean, we of course would want to suggest that they get help, go to a great marriage therapist to figure out how to communicate in a way that, you guys can figure out how to navigate this. Cause it can be a real challenge for people at this stage in their marriage to try to figure out how to move through. So, anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, great point.
And again, I'm just making these
point.
comments because of, my job as a clinical social worker and the stuff that I, hear about and work with like all the time. So, well, guys, I know that it's just about time to end, but didn't know if there were any resources that you guys wanted to share, things that, helped you when you started educating yourself on symptoms of menopause, or, anything that has been useful for you at this stage in your life.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that, there are certainly, there's several books out there. And I think one book that you had recommended to both Hope and myself, Hyde, was The Menopause Reset, which was interesting. And that's all about, sort of changing your diet. But the other resources that I have found helpful and that have a lot of information actually about menopause, you can visit the Endocrine Society, you can visit the Office of Women's Health. Again, these are all online sources. You can visit the North American Menopause Society. And then one that actually has been very helpful is the Society of Women's Health Research. They actually offer a downloadable, it's a menopause preparedness toolkit, and it's basically a 40-page downloadable document, which is kind of like a what to expect when you're expecting guide. That's a book about what to expect when you're expecting a child, but it really helps talk you through what to expect as you walk through the cycle of menopause. So those have been helpful for me. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, the book you referenced before, and really just, very honestly, Google searches, and National Institute of Health and Aging has been a helpful resource for me. And then honestly, just outside of the resources, just talking to some of my friends here, talking to the two of you, talking to some of our siblings about some of the things that they were experiencing, just to try to figure out if some of my symptoms were menopausal or something else. So that's those are the things that I have found helpful as I've tried to navigate this journey.
Yeah. And I think, I've talked to my oncologist because so much of my experience of menopause had to do with, the drugs that I was given in order to get my body into that space. But yeah, I think for people who don't necessarily really agree with like Western approach to medicine, there are a lot of other alternative types of practitioners that you could familiarize yourself with. Like I mentioned earlier, acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and like their philosophy to working with the body. Functional medicine is also another really good alternative for those of you looking for something other than that Western approach to caring for the body. Because a lot of times, for me, I know there's always unintended consequences to some of the medications that Western medical practitioners are going to prescribe. So anyway, I think hopefully we've given you guys some good things to think about as we get ready to close out this episode of Finding Our Way Through. Before we close, you guys, do you have anything that you'd like to say or add before we do?
I think the only thing I want to add is just for any woman who's, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, at this stage in life, try to just be good to yourself. Try to be kind to yourself. Try to be gentle to yourself, and hopefully find some resources that make you feel better about the different things that you're experiencing. They're out there.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with that. I mean, I think being kind to yourself is the most important thing, because, again, it can be really difficult to discuss aging, menopause, mental health challenges, sort of given the pressure of our society and, quite honestly, social media as well. But I think, what you guys have said in terms of like speaking out about the challenges that we're facing, all of us, and finding support networks, whether it's through, family or friends, and any, there are many advocacy organizations as well. And I think all of those together can help assist all of us through this transition in life.
Well, awesome. I know that we have ways for people listening to connect with us. And I don't know, do you want to share ways people can connect with us on social media?
Sure. I think, we have a website, findingourwaythrough.com. Of course, you can find our podcasts. They're available on the major platforms. That's Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And again, we're Finding Our Way Through. You can find us on YouTube at Finding Our Way Through. You can find us on Facebook at Finding Our Way Through. And then on Instagram, we are at Finding Our Way Through. Did I miss any, you guys, or are we good? We covered?
I think TikTok is just it's Finding Our Way Through as well.
I apologize. TikTok as well. So we're on all the podcast mediums, and then of course the social media sites as well. So we hope that you find us, you tune in, you like us, and you subscribe to us.
Yes, please find your way through to us.
And so I guess that's the perfect way to end our podcast. For those of you finding your way through menopause, just remember, you got this.
You got this.
You got this.